So, hey, good morning, Pat and Rick and Stella and Mom. Those of you commenting on the picture that you were looking at, the thumbnail picture, it's supposed to be my depressed look, just looking depressed. And two introductory comments about what we're going to talk about this morning. First of all, we really need to pray for Ukraine. What's going on in Ukraine? It's a disaster. It is a disaster what's going on in Ukraine, and we need to pray for the people of Ukraine, pray for sanity in many ways. So that's something we'll do when we're done. Russia is invading Ukraine as we speak. And the second comment about what we're going to talk about, or the reason I had my depressed pose on the thumbnail picture, is that I was asked by someone. And I've always said, feel free to ask questions. I was asked by someone to talk about my experience with depression. I think I alluded to that on Sunday. I think it was just this past Sunday in the message, just kind of a passing reference that I understood what that's like for people who are going through depressions. And someone asked if I would address that. So that's what I'm going to do this morning. I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about depression. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what it is like for me. In other words, what leads me into depression. I want to talk about what it feels like, and then most importantly, talk about the way out for me of depression. So let me talk about what it is for me. I think most times for me, my depression is not what people call clinical depression. In other words, I don't think there's a real biological component. I don't think I have a biological tendency towards depression. My depression isn't clinical when I experience it. My depression isn't clinical in that it doesn't last for months or a really long period of time. At most, when I'm struggling with depression, at most it's a couple days to a couple weeks that I'm dealing with. And I think for me, most of the times, what I'm dealing with when I'm dealing with depression is what I think of as circumstantial depression. And it's very often a combination of circumstances for me. It's a combination of circumstances that lead me to feeling overwhelmed, and things I just don't want to deal with. And in some ways, I think there is. I said it's not biological. I do think for me sometimes, and probably for a lot of depression, I think there is a biological. I think there's a physical component in that. I know that often what happens to me when I get depressed is that I am worn down and I'm tired out, and I am functioning on a combination of adrenaline and caffeine. You get to you just have a couple series of bad weeks in which you can't juggle everything, a lot of demands, etc. You get to Sunday for me with my schedule, and what happens is if it's some really bad weeks, some really late nights, very early mornings, and Sunday is a day of adrenaline for me. And then sometimes if I go home and have other things I need to do, I start drinking caffeine just to stay awake. So there's that biological, and those of you who have studied this stuff at all, who have ever heard about it, that there's it's a real thing, an adrenaline crash. That is when you're doing something that produces a lot of adrenaline in you, like a Sunday morning for me. The next day there's a crash, and it really does lead to, good morning, Patrice. It does lead to, that's very physical, that adrenaline crash. And the thing is that functioning on adrenaline and caffeine is like driving your car without oil, and it's going to catch up with you really quickly. And you grind, the metal components are going to get ground down, and it's going to crash. So for me, that's a lot what leads me into periods of depression. Usually it is circumstantial, a combination of circumstances. And sometimes if I'm not going to give you any of the circumstances, but sometimes it's a combination of circumstances. If you look at any one particular circumstance, you would say, well, that's not enough to cause depression, and it probably isn't. But it's the combination of them. So that's usually what leads me into my depression. It's not a clinical depression. I don't struggle with that. in the sense that it's not chronic, it's not largely biological, and it's not long term. I think of it mainly for me as a circumstantial kind of thing. So that's what it is. That's what leads me into it. What it feels like. Sorry, got a little bit of a runny nose. What it feels like for me. People talk about depression as a feeling of sadness, and honestly, I don't experience it so much as a feeling of sadness as I do no feelings at all. Um, I just don't feel anything. I don't want to go through the day. I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to face the day. And when I'm out of bed, I want to get back into bed as quickly as I can. Um, it because it's a place you can you can sleep even if you don't sleep well. Um, I don't when I'm in this. There's no feelings of joy. There's no real feelings of sadness. It's no feelings whatsoever for me. Um, and it's different than just feeling sad. I would also experience it that for me, it's a kind of feeling disconnected. It's almost as if I'm watching my world and I'm not in it. I don't know how to explain that, but that's the best way to explain it. I don't feel like I'm in it. I'm just kind of watching. I'm not participating in it. And there's a sense in which you just don't. I just don't care about things. I mean, logically, I know that there are things I care about, but I just don't really care about them. That's the best way to say it. And it's especially, I would say, for me, it's especially a feeling of not wanting to care. I don't want to invest in things. I don't want to care about things. So for me, that is what. Yeah, good morning, Rick. I think I saw you on there earlier, Rick. Yeah. So for me, that's what my depression is. It isn't sadness. Feeling sad is a different thing. It's just no feelings. It's a disconnect. Like you're observing your life. You're not in it. Disconnected from people, from life, from joy, from sadness, from caring. Um, so that's what it is. That's what leads me there. And the person who asked the question, I don't see her on here yet. So maybe I'll have to let her know we talked about it. But yeah, what it is for me circumstantial, and what it feels like is no feelings. Um, it's the best way I know how to say it. I don't feel like I'm sitting around feeling sad. Yes, Aaron, thank you for asking the question. Also, disconnected from everything, disconnected from God, in the sense of I just don't feel like putting effort into that. Like logically, when I talk about feeling disconnected from things, like logically, I know that I'm connected. I just don't feel it. I mean, I can go home and have dinner, and but almost feel like you're observing it. Like Donna's there and Scott's there, the people are there, but I'm not part of it. And I would say it's the same thing in my experience with God. Like logically, I can know. Good morning, Carol. I can know that God is there, but I don't really care, and then I don't feel like putting effort into it. So that's what it feels like for me. Um, Burned out, yeah, Aaron. I would think burned out for me. I think that's the circumstance that part of the circumstance that often leads me to it, leads me into it, being burned out. What I was talking about earlier, just that's the sense of if you drive your car without oil, it's gonna it's a disaster waiting to happen, and that's what happens. I think often for me, functioning on adrenaline and caffeine, it's just not a good. It's not a good recipe. And then combine that sometimes with certain circumstances that we deal with in life. So that's what leads me into what I experience, and I know that that's different for those of you who may experience what we think of as clinical depression, where there's maybe a biological component, and it may be long term. That's not what for me. That's not my experience. But let me talk mainly about the way out. 9 minutes into this, 9.5 minutes already. I wanted to spend more time with this. For me, the way out. I have not ever really gone to a counselor for depression because, as I said, it's not clinical, it's not long term, nor have I ever taken medication for depression. Those of you who deal with depression, when it's a longer term clinical thing, That's stuff you really need to consider, and nothing wrong with it. In fact, that's a good thing, and you ought to be able to do that. Talk to a therapist, even consider medication. Um, and people I know and love that who've been on medication sometimes talk about the fact, the doctor will talk about the fact that really what it does is it just gives you a window. It opens up a window in a sense and allows you to find a little bit of stability, so you can actually start dealing with the things that are causing your depression. I've not had to go that route, largely because of the nature of my depression. Not in any way because there's anything unique about me or special. There's not. It's just that the nature of my depressions, I haven't needed that. But let me talk about the way out. I talked about this some time ago. One of the gifts that you and I have as a human being, and I mentioned this some time ago, one of the gifts that's true of us is we have the ability to think about what we're thinking about. In other words, we can be thinking thoughts like you get angry or depressed or whatever it is. And we have this unique ability to also think about what it is we're thinking about. And that's such a gift. If you're, let me illustrate this way. If you're driving down the road, I had a guy almost drive me off the road the other day. And just somebody who was in a hurry, zooming in and out of traffic. And he didn't have the space between the guy in the left lane and me to zoom between us. So he just started pushing me off the road till I slowed down. Um, and yeah, you're not feeling God, Estella. You are not feeling God in any way when you do that. Nor is God feeling you. It's a way that God has given us to deal with it, to deal with medication. But anyway, to my story, I found myself getting really angry at this guy, wanting to catch up to him on the road and do whatever, give him the finger, whatever. And I started, because of that, because of this gift that we can think about what we're thinking about. I was able to think about, why am I angry? What does it matter to me that this guy's a jerk and he did what he did? I lived, he didn't drive me off the side of the road. I don't benefit in any way by pulling up to him, at the next stoplight and expressing my anger. And you can think about it. And when you think about what you are thinking about, it diffuses it. It has the ability to diffuse what it is we're thinking about. So for me, the fact that I know I can think about what I am thinking about, and then what I can do. And the thing is, here's the thing. A lot of times I don't want to do this. I don't have the energy to do it. I don't feel like I can do it. But I have learned that this for me is part of the way out, to think about what I am thinking about. And I just start to process, why am I here? How did I get here? What are the factors? And here's the thing. If I can be real honest, sometimes when I am in this kind of depression, when I'm thinking about what I'm thinking about, why am I this way? I find myself thinking, the truth is, I don't want to be happy. And that sounds counterintuitive and it sounds ridiculous, but a lot of times that's the bottom line for me. As I process, why am I here? What is causing me this way? And how do I get out? I have to wrestle with this fact that I don't want to be happy. And the reason is, being happy takes energy. It's going to cause me to have to invest in people's lives and in my life. And a lot of times when I'm depressed, I don't want to do that. I don't want to spend any energy. I don't want to invest in anything. I don't want to enjoy things because I don't want to be in it, blah, blah, blah. And as soon as I face that, for me, this is, I'm sure it's not true for everybody. As soon as I face that sense of, this is where I want to be. And I know it sounds ridiculous because nobody wants to be there. But when I start facing that, I can also start talking myself out of depression by recognizing that there are some things I'm going to have to do and face to get out of this. So for me, it always starts there. And I think sometimes I just do this habitually now when I find myself thinking, and it takes a while. It's not magic because, as I say, a lot of the times I, when I'm there, I have to face the fact that I don't want to get out of this. There's some comfort in it. There's being disconnected, not being engaged, is in some ways it's a safe place to be. It takes energy to do otherwise. So I start there by thinking about what I'm thinking about, and recognizing in my own brain what is happening. And then I can start to talk myself out of it. Let me give you a couple of things that I do. And I know I have to do these things. And to be honest with you, I don't have the energy for any of them. Most of us don't when we're depressed. This is going to sound really, really stupid to you, and really silly and really juvenile. But one of the things that I have learned to do, I mentioned this before, is whistle or sing, especially in the morning when I'm hopping in the shower. I have found, personally, I have found I cannot maintain unhappiness when I'm whistling. That sounds really stupid, or singing, but whistling is more fun for me. And here's the thing, I don't want to do it. As I'm like, getting up in the morning and like knowing I have to face a day. Yeah, Carol, it happens, and it's a good thing when we can do that. I mean, gosh, think about any other kind of thing we deal with. You have pain, you take ibuprofen or whatever it is to deal with it. This is the same kind of thing. So there's nothing wrong with taking medication. So yeah, so for me, a little thing like that, whistling, and I'll tell you that what can happen is a lot of time, and I know it sounds ridiculous. It really does sound ridiculous, even just to say it out loud. But I have found I cannot maintain unhappiness if I force myself to whistle. Just the act of doing that, doing something that is by nature joyful, it helps me to start climbing out of that. And I can tell you that I can go through 3, 4, 5, 6 mornings in a row knowing that I really need to do this. I need to get out of this despair, and talk myself out of doing that. Like, no, I just don't have the energy. It doesn't matter. Just get on with your day. But when I finally say, yeah, laughing out loud. That's another thing, Aaron. Find some funny stuff on YouTube, or whatever it is. For me, like reading Far Side comics, anything like that, that just inspires some laughter. When you do things where you can't maintain sadness like that by whistling or doing something that's fun, it you can't do it. You can't maintain sadness at the same time that you're doing these things. Now, again, this is me. I'm not talking about like a long-term clinical depression. This is the stuff that I deal with. So I forced myself to do some of those joy-inspiring things like whistling. I mean, that's not the only solution, but sometimes that's where it starts. The other thing I know that I do is there are just real practical things, like taking a hike, even if it's just a hike around the neighborhood, going down to Trexler Park, going down to the yeah the I can't even think of what they're called, but some of the parks in Allentown. And often I ride my bikes through those parks. But go for a hike, go for a bike ride. Um, and here's the thing. Literally, I have to force myself to do that. And again, I can fail 2, 3 days in a row. And what can happen very often is I can be sitting here at work, knowing that I am in this place of despair, knowing what the way out is. And I will tell myself, I'm going to go home and go for a walk. I'm going to go home and go for a bike ride, even go to the gym. I'm going to go home and go to the gym. And by the time I drive from here to my home, which is less than 2 minutes, I can have talked myself out of doing that. I get home and say I have no energy. I don't want to face it. I don't want to have to change. I don't have to get my bike out of the garage. I don't have the time, blah, blah, blah. So I can talk myself out of it sometimes 2, 3, 4 more days in a row before I do it. So I know I have to, I know it. I know I have to force myself to do that. But when I do those things, when I go for a hike, go for a bike ride, go to the gym, whatever it is, again, there's a physical component. There's something that happens to our bodies that that helps us to get out of that despair and the depression that we're in. So I may fail at that 5 times in a row. And sometimes for me, that just makes the depression worse, because that my voice is then telling me, what a loser you are, what a jerk you are. You sit at work and you want to do this, and you get home and you can't face getting changed, into sweaty clothing or whatever it is. What a jerk. And then I talk myself out of just a wasted day kind of thing. And again, for me, then the benefit is the fact that as human beings we can think about what we're thinking about. it helps me to process like, no, this kind of self-talk is defeating, and it's just a day. All you did is a day got away from you. That's it. It's not the end of the world. Tomorrow is, start over, or sometimes even, well, in my schedule, evenings are not great. Usually they're full. So it's not like if I don't do it at lunch, I can think, well, after dinner I'll do it. For me, it's usually like, well, you're gonna have to wait till tomorrow. But I do that anyway. So that thing. So I can fail 5 days in a row and then still do it. But that's what happens. I know there are things I can do. Um, um, yeah, and asking God about it. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Then the other component for me, along with this, is actually telling other people. So, for example, if I'm in this cycle of knowing I can do things to get out of it, take a walk, go for a hike, take an afternoon off, whatever it is. If I'm not doing it, I will often discipline myself. Disciplines me. That's not the right word, but I'll just tell Donna. I will say like I'll say, hey, I'm in a really bad place right now. Usually she knows. I mean, it's obvious. Just just to look at my face, the passive kind of blah look on my face, the way I'm interacting, she'll usually know. And Donna will often ask, why, what's going on? And I usually say, I don't know, because I don't always know exactly what's going on. But Donna doesn't try to fix it. She does not try to fix it for me. She will talk and be ready for me to talk about it, but she doesn't try to fix it. But when I tell another person what I'm dealing with, and when I say to her something like, I'm in a bad place right now, and I may say, I really need to get back to the gym, or I need to get out and do it. Or sometimes I'll even say, how about we go for a walk at dinner time tomorrow, or whatever it is. And by doing that, there's a little bit of a built-in accountability. And for me, that little bit of accountability, even if it's just this much, it's enough to overcome that lack of inertia that I'm feeling. And it just is a little bit of momentum, the fact that I've said something. Um, so, um, so yeah, and then the last component for me is faith, what Aaron's talking about. Um, and in that inner dialogue that's going on is also a dialogue with God about when I look at the circumstances that have often driven me into this kind of despair and depression. Um, a lot of times it's this reminder that God, you're bigger than this and you can handle this, or even this person that is causing this. Sometimes it's, praying some of those Psalms like, God, vengeance belongs to you and not me. I don't need to get even. I don't need to try to, have fantasies about getting back at this person. Or on the other hand, I can look at people and say, God, you love them more than I do, and they are in your hands, and I'm going to trust them with you. And it's not shirking responsibility. It's that recognition of there's some things that I can't do. So this dialogue with God about what's going on. Now, here's the thing, as I mentioned, a lot of times in this depression, when I'm dealing with it, when I'm feeling disconnected from God, the I don't have the energy for some of my habits, my devotional habits, reading the Bible in the morning, typically, listening to Lectio. And so I start shirking those things. It's just, I just don't have the energy to invest in it. So, I skip it. Now, here's the thing for me. There's an advantage that I have. Skipping church is not much of an option for me. Not that I ever feel that badly about it, but so yeah, when church is your job, it's not like on a Sunday morning I can wake up and say I'm too depressed, I don't feel like going. It doesn't work. So for me, depression is not an excuse to stay away from church, and that is to my advantage. That's to my advantage because I have to be here. And so sometimes the funny thing is I can be here early in the morning. I usually get to church pretty early on a Sunday morning, like final review of my message and praying about it, etc. And the band shows up and they start rehearsing. And I will sit in here. Sometimes I'll actually go out in there in the auditorium sanctuary and sing along with the band with as they rehearse. Anyway, so this is one of those other things, this connection with God. This is one of those other things I actually have to force myself to do when I'm in depression. I don't feel like it. I don't run to God when I am depressed. I tend to just not care. So I just have to force myself to do it. So I can skip 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 mornings of devotions because I don't have the energy. But eventually I'm going to, maybe in a combination with other things, maybe, that stupid little exercise of whistling or finding joy or being outside. If it lifts me up enough, it leads me back to wanting to read the Bible in the morning. And it's not that it's not that I am angry at God, although sometimes that may be part of it, but it's usually not. It's usually I just don't care. I don't have the energy to care. So I don't feel anything. But then I will get back to those habits and engage with God. And in my journal, even if sometimes I just write one word, in my journal, I'm not writing paragraphs. Sometimes it's just word. It might be just the word help in my journal. Or sometimes I'll write a sentence and I'll just say, I don't feel like doing this morning. Just the fact that I am doing that, just the fact that I am in dialogue with God is a help, and it's helping me on the way out of this. And it's forcing myself to be engaged with God when I don't feel like it. And for me, all of those things, just those steps are for me the way out of depression. Sometimes I can feel myself sliding into it. Sometimes I know it's coming. I can feel myself sliding into it. And in the same way, I can feel myself sliding out of it. I can have a day where it's not so blah and I am not so disconnected, and I'm recognizing, oh, finally this is lifting, and I'm getting out of this, and that in itself is an antidepressant for me. Just the acknowledgement that it's going away, and then I'm back to enjoying life. So that's the way it works for me. I know we're different. I know that my experience isn't the same as all of yours. And yeah, that's another thing, just taking the walks and listening. So that is, all of those are really good things that we can do for this. But I think it's common for everybody. I don't think anybody goes through life without dealing with depression. For those people who deal with a clinical depression, I mean, I have people I love who do. And, when they talk at times about, I think all of us at times have felt like there are times that I sometimes, when I'm in this and I'm thinking it'd be easier to not be here. And I know you know what I'm talking about, but I have never, ever gotten to the place where I'm actively thinking, I want to end my life and processing how. Now, for people who feel that level of depression, it just breaks my heart, because that level of blackness and unfeelingness really has to hurt in very deep ways. I've never dealt with that. And if that's what you're struggling with, if that's what a person struggles with, like I said on Sunday, don't let this YouTube end without saying you're going to take a step. Email me, pastor@horizonconnect.org, or do something. Take some step to get help, because help is there. Help is available for this. But for all of us, that's what my experience is like. So for a person that asked the question, I hope that helps in some ways to understand what I was talking about when I talked about it on Sunday. It's my experience. And there's probably more to it than that, but those are the notes I wrote. So anyway, hope that helps. So I want to pray. And as I said when we started, I'm going to pray for what's going on in Ukraine. I don't really know how to pray exactly. Very often I don't know how to pray. But I want to pray for that. I want to pray for any of us who struggle with depression, and especially right now. There's also a seasonal component to depression. Many of you experience depression in the winter. I experience it in July and August. That's when I hate those seasons. I know it makes no sense, but that's just the way it is. it's also, there's a job component to that, trying to do church when, you know, everybody in church is saying, hey, I won't be here for a while. That's life. Been doing this for 40 years, and that's the way it is. But anyway, so let me pray for us. All right. God, thank you, God, that you woke us up this morning. Thank you for the day ahead of us. We all face different things today, God, and some of those are going to be joyful things, and some of those are going to be hard things and sorrowful things. But God, you're with us. And I think about what we studied last night, Bible study, Psalm 23, the fact that even when we go through the darkest of dark valleys, we don't have anything to fear because you are with us. And I pray, God, that you'd remind us of that today, that even in the darkest moments of life, you have not abandoned us. You are still with us. Help us to hang on to that. You care about us deeply. God, one of the things on all of our minds this morning is what is going on in Ukraine with Russia. There's a part of us, God, that gets angry. We don't understand why. We don't understand what Mr. Putin is thinking, what kind of irrational decisions and choices he's making. But God, this is dangerous, deadly. People have died. People will die. And your world, the world that you care about, the world you created, is one more time being pushed into turmoil. God, I pray for strong leaders. I pray for strong leaders who are going to stand against this. I pray for strong leaders who have the courage, who will not kowtow, but who will find ways to say this has to stop, and it has to stop yesterday. God, I pray that those leaders would be wise, that they would find ways to do so without escalating this in any way. I pray for the Christians in Ukraine. I know, God, that even right now there are Christians gathering all across Ukraine, probably in Russia as well, and elsewhere, neighboring countries, who for them, this is not just a scary item on the news, but this is the life that they are living. And they're nervous, they're scared, they're wondering about the consequences for them, for people that they love. And I know, God, that I think even Estella said that she has family there. So, God, I pray for those who are intimately involved. Keep them safe, protect them, help them to know what to do, whether they should get out of the way, whether they should stay. God, just give them direction. Father, for all of us, those of us who have at times struggled with depression, and maybe even those people who are struggling with it now, it's such an ugly place for us to be as human beings. I think that you understand it. I know you do. I know that Jesus himself found himself in those times of despair, wondering where you were, wondering why you'd abandoned him, and struggling, God, with those moments. So you know, I pray, God, that you will help us to do the hard things when we're there, to do the things we don't want to do. But those are the things that will help us out. God, I pray for people who struggle chronically with this. Help them not to be ashamed of asking for help or of taking medication. Help them to understand this is a gift from you. This is the way you've ordered our world, and we can take advantage. But above all, God, help us to know that even in those valleys of the shadows of death, those dark valleys, there's not a second that you turn your back on us, not 1 second that you are away from us. You're there to guide us, comfort us, protect us, help us to believe that, trust that, and to live accordingly. And I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Alrighty, everybody. Well, thank you very much. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful day. Keep praying. Keep praying for what's going on in our world. And thanks for hanging in there this morning. And I will see you all live or on YouTube on Sunday morning, if not before. Have a wonderful day. Love you all. Goodbye.